Hello, it's Charlie Minato from halfwheel.com, and today I'm looking at a travel humidor that most of you have probably never seen before. Now, if it looks familiar, it's because A, you're on our website reading this review, or B, you've been in an airport recently. This is the Rimowa travel humidor. It's made by the German luggage manufacturer Rimowa, and they've been making aluminum luggage since 1937. They've been making it with these grooves since 1950, and it is certainly an iconic look. Rimowa basically only makes luggage. They make it in this style, they make it in black as well as a champagne color, they make it polycarbonate luggage, they make some film cases, and then they have something called the Gourmet series, which is what this falls under. It's 3 different pieces, 2 of them are wine-based items, and then the travel humidor is the 3rd, and they're only sold within the Rimowa flagships throughout the world, which is one of 2 reasons why you probably haven't seen this before. The other is that it's not exactly the most affordable thing in the world. This particular unit came from Germany, where it was sold for 479 euros in one of the flagships, which is $515 based off of current exchange rates. But I think that's actually a little bit less than what it was actually at the time because of the declining euro. The flagship store in Dallas currently has these in stock at $675, and because they're only sold in the flagships and not online, you also will have to pay tax. So if I was to go to the store in Dallas and buy it, it would be $730 in change. Now, it measures 6.5 inches from here to here, 9 3/4 inches from here to here. It's 2.9 inches from this top groove to this bottom groove. As you've seen, it kind of looks the same throughout, and it's identical on each side. It opens via this clasp, which has a nice satisfying motion, and it closes via the clasp as well. And so when you open it up, you're greeted with this. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that this is wood, and it is Spanish cedar. It's got 10 slots grooved in, 5 on each side of these long slots that run the full length of the humidor, or essentially the full length. And then it's got 2 smaller ones. And the smaller ones are made for the Credo humidifier, which comes included. And Credo is generally regarded as being sort of the top-of-the-line floral foam-based humidification system, but it still is floral foam. And if you've read any of my reviews before of humidification products, you know that I'm not a large fan of it for reasons that we'll get to in a second. You'll also notice these 4 things, these wooden planks. I was not sure what they were for when I first opened it up. They are not in fact cedar spills, but we'll get to them in a second. So the way that you store cigars is with this elastic band, and so what you do is you take your cigars, and I've found that the best way to do this is to put the thinner cigars on the outside and then the thicker cigars in the middle. It doesn't really matter what order you put them in, like in terms of placing them in, as long as you go thin to thick in the middle. But you do kind of want to lift up the elastic band so that you're not damaging the cigars that way. So the advantage to this is that the cigars, particularly cigars that aren't box pressed, generally stay in place, and they seem to be doing well. But if we were to just take this and switch the Quesada out with this Illusione, what you will find is that the Illusione is not even touching the elastic band, and so it's going to want to slide, grab those, all the way around the humidor. And it also not in this particular case, because these other 4 cigars are all roughly the same diameter. What it also does is it means that the rest of the cigars also have a tendency to slide around. But as long as you stick to the thin on the outside, thick in the middle, it generally works out quite well. Now, as for the wooden planks, these are made to go underneath the elastic band, and there's a sort of a ledge on each side where they can go. And what they're made for is putting large ring gauge cigars in the humidor. Now, what I found is that for the purpose of the planks, 56 is sort of the starting point of when I would say they're necessary. At 54, you can get away with not using them. At 60, you definitely need them. And they prevent the cigars from being smashed while still keeping them in quite snug. Now, as you'll notice, there's not really any use for these 2, and that was a big problem when I was reviewing this unit or using the unit for the last 3 months. You sort of just have to either let them rattle around, which also means they can damage the cigars that are being stored inside the travel humidor, or you do what I did, which is leave them outside. And so I just put them in a desktop humidor and use them as needed. As far as using it, it requires a little bit more work than a typical travel humidor. You do have to sort of pay attention to which cigars are going where, and making sure, like I said, from the thin cigars on the outside to the thick in the middle. But other than that, it works quite well. One area where I think it really does shine is when it comes to cigars that aren't in cellophane. I haven't cleaned this out, but there's a lot less tobacco shards, there are some, in the humidor than I typically find with using a foam-based solution. Now, that could be because the foam clings onto the tobacco a lot more than the Spanish cedar does, but I also think it's because it also isn't clinging onto the wrappers as much, and so they aren't sliding around, they aren't getting damaged as much. If you take your time and you lift this up, there's a lot less risk for just sort of tearing small bits and pieces off the wrapper. Other than that, my only sort of other note is that I would recommend ditching the Credo. I think there's a couple reasons behind this. The first is that it gives you the ability to store one extra cigar in the humidor. The second is that the Credos have an ability to run a little bit wetter than I'd like, particularly for a travel humidor. I found it to be at the 71, 72 range, which isn't that bad for floral foam, but given this is a travel humidor, it means the cigars are about to be smoked, and so I want them to be a little bit drier than 71, 72. Somewhere around the kind of 65 range would be really my comfort range for that. The other problem with the Credo is that it dried out while I was using it. So at some point after the first month or so, it dried out completely, and then the winter air was basically the only thing in the humidor. And that meant the cedar started to dry out. It meant that I had to reseason the humidor, and that's not fun. Now, using a Boveda solves a lot of those issues, largely because the Boveda, you can kind of feel it or look at it and tell if there's any humidity left in it. And so I would highly recommend, if you have one of these or if you're getting one of these, to go with Boveda, which, as many of you know, is sort of my preferred solution when it comes to humidity. That being said, it's a travel humidor, and it is a travel humidor. It works quite well. It's a very expensive one, and I think if we ignore price for a second, which is sort of hard to do when you're talking about a $700-ish unit, there are some other things. So this is my normal travel humidor. This is a Pelican case that's got 2 foam inserts in it, and it stores 8 cigars, 8 normal length cigars. You can sometimes get a few more in there if they're shorter. And one thing you'll notice is that it's much smaller in volume than the Rimowa is, particularly when it comes to that. It's also half the weight. This only weighs a pound with a Boveda in it. This is 2.2 pounds, and that's not the greatest thing in the world, to be quite honest. It takes up a lot more space. It does carry a few more cigars than the Pelican case does, but it's also a lot heavier, and it gets a little annoying and taxing at times to have that extra weight there. Then there's the price, which is a big issue. For the price of this, you could get a very nice leather case. You get a 5-count Pelican or Zycar cigar caddy case. You get a 10-count Zycar Pelican cigar caddy, a 15-count Zycar Pelican cigar caddy, a 45 to 60-count Pelican Zycar cigar caddy, and you'd still probably have about $300 left over. Or you can get the Rimowa Travel Humidor. And so I think that leads to the recommendation. If you want the best, this certainly is up there. More importantly, if you want to have something that no one else at your local cigar shop has, particularly if you're in the U.S., this is the way to go. It's very unlikely that anyone else is going to have one of these. There aren't a lot of people that are willing to spend $675 on a travel humidor, and at least it's not something where you're just wasting money. It does work quite well. But if you're trying to find value in a $700 travel humidor, certainly not a place to look. For more reviews of travel humidors, humidification products, cigars, and cigar news, please visit halfwheel.com.